The sun had barely risen over Silicon Valley when Amara Jackson stepped into the gleaming glass office of Neuronetics, her AI company that had, in less than a decade, revolutionized predictive analytics and neuroadaptive interfaces. She was dressed as sharply as her mind: tailored navy suit, sleek bun, minimalist gold jewelry, an image of calm authority in a world driven by speed, power, and perception. On her desk, a folder stamped "Confidential" sat waiting. Inside were the final acquisition documents from the Devereaux Group, a conglomerate so old money and entrenched in the American elite that their name alone sent whispers down Wall Street. The offer was bold: $1 billion in cash and stock to buy Neuronetics outright. Not a merger, a buyout. Amara would retain her CEO position for 3 years under contract, after which she could walk away with generational wealth. On paper, it was everything any founder could ask for. But for Amara, it was more complicated than that. She hadn't started Neuronetics for the exit. It began in her cramped apartment in Oakland, where she juggled grad school, a bartending job, and a burning obsession with building tech that could read and react to the human brain in real time. It wasn't flashy back then. It was code on a cracked laptop, whiteboards covered in neurolinguistic algorithms, sleepless nights, and cold pizza. Now, 10 years later, Neuronetics was the crown jewel of next-gen tech, its systems used in everything from personalized medicine to adaptive learning in education. Amara had gone from being ignored in VC boardrooms to being named on the Forbes cover as the mind behind the machine. And yet, even in her position of power, she felt the undercurrents of doubt, that sneaky sense that some people still viewed her success as a fluke, a feel-good diversity story, rather than the result of her brilliance. That was one of the reasons the Devereaux offer intrigued her. It wasn't just about the money. It was about legitimacy. The Devereaux didn't invest in just any company, they acquired legacy. If she agreed, she would become part of the same portfolio that included major media networks, real estate empires, and political influence. It would put her name in the history books, not just the headlines. Still, she hesitated. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from her CFO, Lynn. Final dinner with Devereaux confirmed. Their estate, Saturday, should be the last step before signing. Amara stared at the message for a moment, then stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of her office. From the 23rd floor, she could see the city stretching in every direction, buildings that had once seemed unreachable now below her. She thought about her mother, a public school teacher in Atlanta who had worked double shifts and night classes so her daughter could go to MIT. She thought about the investors who told her they weren't sure the market was ready for a black woman CEO. And she thought about her team, many of whom had followed her from day one, trusting her vision when no one else would. "Don't let the price tag blind you," she whispered to herself. Still, she decided to attend the dinner. If nothing else, it would confirm what she already suspected, whether the Devereaux saw her as a partner or a pawn. Saturday. The Devereaux estate in the Hamptons was exactly what Amara expected, and everything she despised. Massive white columns framed the entrance of a mansion, so large it could be mistaken for a museum. The kind of place that whispered old wealth, where every brick seemed soaked in generational entitlement. A valet took her keys as a butler led her inside. "Ms. Jackson, welcome," said Margot Devereaux, the matriarch dressed in pearls and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We're so thrilled to finally host the woman of the hour." "Thank you for having me," Amara replied evenly, slipping into the practiced poise she wore in rooms like this. Rooms where she was often the only one who looked like her. The guest list was intimate, just a dozen people, all white, all extravagantly wealthy, and all curious about the billionaire tech genius in their midst. The dinner began with polite small talk, politics, markets, art, but beneath it all was a subtle dance, an unspoken test of belonging. So Amara asked Henry Devereaux, the patriarch and CEO of the family conglomerate, "When you started your company, did you ever imagine you'd be sitting at a table like this?" The question dripped with condescension, though it was masked as charm. "I imagined I'd be running the table," Amara said with a calm smile. A few guests chuckled nervously. The conversation moved on, but the tone had been set. Throughout the night, the questions kept coming. Not malicious, but patronizing, as though they couldn't reconcile her intelligence with her identity. And then came Preston. Drunk, entitled, and arrogant, the eldest Devereaux son stood to make a toast near the end of the meal. He raised his glass, swaying slightly. To Amara Jackson he slurred, proof that with the right algorithm, anyone, and I mean anyone, can become a billionaire. Even a girl from the hood. The room froze. A few people laughed. Others looked away, awkwardly. No one said a word to stop him. Preston wasn't done. And let's be honest, he added, mimicking her voice in an exaggerated southern accent. Y'all know I ain't no sellout. I just let the white folks think they own me. More laughter. This time louder. Crueler. Amara's face didn't change. Her expression was still, like stone under pressure. She didn't storm out. She didn't cry. She simply placed her napkin on the table, stood up, and smiled. Thank you for the meal, she said, voice calm but deadly. I believe I've seen enough. She walked out without another word, her heels echoing against the marble floor, a sound more powerful than any speech she could have given. Amara Jackson's exit from the Devereaux estate was silent but seismic. Outside, the night air was cool, the Atlantic breeze brushing against her skin. The valet jogged over with her car, trying not to meet her eyes. Perhaps he had overheard. Perhaps he, too, had been through a moment where dignity had to be protected like a fortress. She slid into the driver's seat of her black Tesla and closed the door. The silence inside the cabin was absolute. For a moment, she sat there, motionless, hands resting on the steering wheel. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. Lynn, everything okay? Want me to schedule tomorrow's call with legal? Amara stared at the message. Then she typed 2 words. Hold everything. Back at the estate, inside the Devereaux mansion, the atmosphere shifted subtly after her departure. No one said it out loud, but even the most oblivious among them felt a tension, an invisible line that had been crossed. Margot Devereaux frowned, sipping her wine. Do you think she was offended? She asked, as if the answer wasn't obvious. Henry, her husband, shrugged. She's a tough woman. She'll get over it. This is business. Preston, clearly still drunk, scoffed. Please, she's lucky we're even offering to buy her little project. Everyone loves a rags-to-riches story. Makes us look progressive. A few of the guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. No one dared challenge him, not publicly, not in this room. But behind the polished facades, some of them knew. Amara wasn't the type to get over it. Back in the city, by the time Amara reached her penthouse in Manhattan, she had made up her mind. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She didn't vent to friends or scroll Twitter for validation. That wasn't her style. Instead, she sat at her kitchen island, poured a glass of water, and opened her laptop. The acquisition documents sat waiting in her inbox. Final revisions. Signatures pending. One click, and the billion-dollar deal would be done. She clicked delete. Then she opened a new email and typed to legalteam@neuronetics.com subject, termination of Devereaux acquisition effective immediately. Terminate all acquisition discussions with the Devereaux Group. Do not respond to any further communications from their representatives. Reason: misalignment of values. We don't sell our soul for $1 billion. Amara Jackson, CEO, Neuronetics. The morning after, when Henry Devereaux received the email the next morning, he was halfway through his usual cigar and Wall Street Journal routine. He assumed it was a joke at first, a tactic, maybe to negotiate more favorable terms. She'll come back around, he muttered, tossing the paper aside. But by noon, their legal team confirmed it. Neuronetics had officially withdrawn. No appeals, no renegotiations. The door was shut, bolted. What the hell happened? Henry asked, pacing his office. She left early last night. Margot said, maybe Preston said something. It didn't take long for the truth to come out. Someone had filmed the toast. Just a 45-second clip taken discreetly by one of the younger guests. It showed Preston's slurred mockery, the laughter that followed, and Amara's silent, dignified exit. The guest, horrified by what had transpired, sent the video to someone in Amara's PR circle. By noon, the clip had leaked. By 2 o'clock, it was viral. The internet responds, hashtag stand with Amara, hashtag not your diversity deal, hashtag billion-dollar boundaries. Social media exploded with outrage. Influencers, tech CEOs, and civil rights leaders weighed in. Amara Jackson built one of the most powerful AI companies in the world, and this is how the establishment treats her? Shameful. At Tech Truth Daily, we don't clap for Black excellence only to watch it mocked in rooms that profit from it. At Angela writes, every woman in tech has had a Preston moment. The difference is Amara had the power to walk away, and she did. At Dr. Maya Lang, even celebrities chimed in. A-list actors, athletes, and musicians praised Amara's composure and backbone. Some of the loudest backlash came from within the tech industry itself. Executives who had once eyed Neuronetics enviously now stood behind its founder. Suddenly, the Devereaux weren't just dealing with a lost deal, they were dealing with a PR disaster. Behind the curtain, Amara, meanwhile, remained silent. She declined interviews. She didn't post on social media. She didn't release a statement. Her silence made more noise than any press release could. Instead, she focused on her company, her team, her purpose. Her employees, especially the women and people of color on her staff, saw her decision as an act of courage. The office buzzed with renewed energy. Interns whispered in awe. Engineers worked longer hours, not out of fear, but out of pride. She really did that. One senior developer said, she walked away from $1 billion for principle. No, corrected another. She walked away because she knows she's worth more. The Devereaux scramble over the next week. The Devereaux group tried to save face. Preston issued a half-hearted apology on Instagram, claiming he had been misunderstood and deeply respected Ms. Jackson's accomplishments. The post was ratioed into oblivion. Thousands of commenters pointed out that nowhere in the message did he say sorry. The family released a statement condemning inappropriate behavior, but it was too little, too late. Stockholders began asking questions. Board members grew nervous. The Devereaux had not only lost a billion-dollar acquisition. They'd alienated a generation of entrepreneurs and innovators who no longer saw their name as a badge of honor, but a symbol of outdated arrogance. A message, not just a moment on the second Monday after the fallout. Amara finally made a statement, not on social media, but at a private breakfast hosted by the National Association of Women in Tech. Standing at the podium in a cream suit with no notes, she spoke simply, "Power is knowing when to walk away." They thought I needed their validation. They thought their wealth gave them permission to disrespect me. But let me be clear, I wasn't the guest at that party. I was the one holding the keys to the future, and I walked away because I own the room now, not them. The crowd erupted. That day, Neuronetics received 3 new acquisition offers, all higher than the Devereaux deal. Amara turned them down, because now it wasn't about selling. It was about building something that couldn't be bought. The news cycles moved quickly, they always did, but somehow Amara Jackson stayed at the center of it all. What began as a leaked video of a drunken insult had turned into a full-blown corporate reckoning. Boardrooms across the country were suddenly holding emergency DI meetings, PR teams scrambled to review internal policies, and tech podcasts couldn't go 5 minutes without bringing up Amara's name. But while the world roared in outrage and support, Amara remained steady, graceful, silent. It was the silence that made her stronger. The morning after the fallout, Amara's executive assistant, Gala, walked into the Neuronetics office early Monday morning with 2 cappuccinos and an anxious look. "You ready for the circus?" she asked, setting one on Amara's desk. Amara looked up from her screen and smiled faintly. "Was I ever not living in one?" Gala chuckled, then lowered her voice. "The media's outside. CNN, Bloomberg, some freelance podcaster named Jamal with a mic and a dream." Amara glanced at the office window, where curtains shielded the floor from the street below. "I'm not talking to anyone right now," she said. "Let them talk. I've got work to do." That was the core of her unshakable focus. Holding the high ground, her legal team had advised her to consider a defamation lawsuit. What Preston said, especially in a business context, could warrant action, they argued. But Amara declined. I'm not here to punish them, she said. I'm here to outgrow them. Instead of revenge, she chose redirection. She poured her energy into her team, holding listening sessions and internal discussions that helped staff, especially younger Black employees, process what had happened. I know what it's like to feel like you're the only one in the room who doesn't belong, Amara told them during one all-hands meeting. But let me remind you, you do belong and you're not alone anymore. The team responded with a standing ovation. What could have been a demoralizing moment became a unifying one. Morale surged. Productivity spiked. Everyone from interns to senior VPs felt like they were part of something bigger, a movement, not just a company. Behind closed doors, while Amara held her composure in public, she did allow herself one moment of release. Late, one evening after most of the team had gone home, she stood alone in the office's meditation room. It was a small, serene space she designed when they built their new HQ, plants, soft lighting, and a round skylight that let the stars peek through at night. She sank into the beanbag chair in the center of the room and let out a long breath. For 10 minutes, she sat in silence. Not meditating, not planning, just feeling. The humiliation, the betrayal, the disappointment, the weight of always having to be composed, articulate above it all. She didn't cry, but her throat burned with all the words she hadn't said, the ones she'd swallowed at that dinner table. Then, softly, she whispered to the empty room, "You will not break me. You will not own me. You do not get to define me." The words were not for the Devereaux. They were for herself. And with that, she stood up, dusted off her slacks, and walked back into the world. Calls from the Giants by midweek, Amara's decision to cancel the deal had inspired major ripples in the industry. Within days, she had private calls scheduled with Satya from Microsoft, congratulating her and floating partnership opportunities. Ava DuVernay, asking to tell her story as a limited series. A global VC firm, offering double the Devereaux amount, with zero strings attached. A White House advisor requesting she join a task force on ethics in AI. Her inbox, once filled with cautious interest, now overflowed with respect and awe. But Amara didn't rush. She took the calls, listened carefully, and made one thing clear to everyone: I'm not building this company to sell it. I'm building it so no one like me ever has to beg for a seat again. Preston tries to apologize days later. A letter arrived. Handwritten. Delivered by courier. From Preston Devereaux. It was long and dripping with carefully curated remorse. He apologized for his poor judgment, claimed he was working on himself, and hoped she would find it in her heart to forgive him. Amara read it once, then placed it in the shredder beside her desk without saying a word. Grace didn't mean reconciliation. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. And sometimes, silence was the only reply dignity required. A quiet visit later that week, Amara made a private visit to her mother's grave in Atlanta. The cemetery was quiet, the sky a soft gray. She brought fresh lilies and knelt beside the headstone. "Hey, Mama," she said quietly, "you were right. The world's going to try and make you small, make you silent. But I didn't let them. I walked away. From the deal. From the insult. From the lie that their money means more than my name." She paused, brushing a leaf off the stone. "I thought I needed their approval. But what I really needed was to remember who raised me." A single tear rolled down her cheek, and she let it fall. The message resounds what began as an insult had evolved into something powerful. On college campuses, students studied Amara's response in leadership seminars. DEI programs referenced her story as a case study in dignity and boundaries. Black entrepreneurs, men and women alike, saw her as a blueprint for navigating hostile spaces with integrity. She didn't just survive the insult. She turned it into a platform. And in doing so, she made it clear: true power is not measured by the checks you cash, but by the ones you choose to walk away from. The ripple effect from Amara Jackson's decision reached far beyond boardrooms and social media feeds. What was once a private insult at an elite gathering had turned into a cultural moment, And for the Devereaux family, a slow-moving corporate catastrophe. The billion-dollar deal had crumbled, but worse than that, their name, once synonymous with power and prestige, was now tainted. They underestimated Amara. They never expected her to walk away. They certainly never expected the world to take her side. Damage control. Too little, too late. 3 days after the video went viral, the Devereaux Group issued a carefully crafted press release. The Devereaux family deeply regrets the events that occurred at the recent private dinner. We reaffirm our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and are conducting a full internal review of our culture and leadership values. The corporate language was sterile, vague, passionless. Worse, it didn't mention Amara's name once. The public noticed. Twitter, now known as X, lit up with critiques. Translation, "We're sorry we got caught." No name, no responsibility, no sincerity. DI isn't a press release. It's how you act when no one's watching. Imagine embarrassing a black woman in a room full of billionaires and thinking a PDF can fix it. The press release had the opposite effect. It reignited outrage and painted the Devereaux as cold and calculated. Investors began pulling out quietly. One media holding company canceled a pending joint venture. A celebrity-endorsed fashion brand publicly cut ties with a Devereaux-backed venture capital fund. The family's decades-long reputation as the classiest name in American business was unraveling one headline at a time. Inside the family war room, inside the towering Devereaux Manhattan headquarters, panic was mounting. In a dimly lit boardroom, Henry Devereaux slammed his hand on the polished table. "We've weathered worse," he barked. "The media will move on." But even his tone lacked its usual conviction. Margot, sipping her tea with trembling fingers, wasn't so sure. This isn't just a PR blunder. We humiliated a woman who built a billion-dollar empire from scratch. In front of witnesses, the public is furious, and worse, they admire her more than they fear us. Preston, sitting in the corner, looked pale and unshaven. "I said I was sorry," he muttered. Henry turned sharply. "You don't get to apologize for wrecking the deal of the decade, Preston. You blew it, and now we all pay." The family's advisors were more blunt. One leaned in and said, "This isn't just about your image anymore. This is about the future of your empire. You've lost the confidence of an entire generation of talent and investors." Henry's jaw clenched. They had always believed they could buy their way through storms, but this wasn't a storm. This was a reckoning. Amara's empire grows while the Devereaux scrambled. Amara thrived. With the deal dead, she turned inward, refocusing on innovation, expansion, and long-term legacy. Instead of scaling back, she doubled down. She launched Neuronetics Global, a bold initiative to build AI hubs in underserved communities around the world, starting in Detroit, Lagos, and Rio de Janeiro. The goal: to democratize access to artificial intelligence tools and training. She started a fellowship program for women of color in STEM, fully funded by her company's profits. She expanded her R&D department, hiring young, diverse engineers who had been overlooked by the very venture capitalists who once doubted her. And she rejected every new acquisition offer, some as high as $1.4 billion. One reporter asked her why she turned them down. Her response? "Because my company isn't for sale, and neither am I." A cultural icon is born as Amara's story gained traction. She became something more than a CEO. She became a symbol, not just for black women in tech, but for anyone who had ever been underestimated, mocked, or told they didn't belong. Her face appeared on the covers of Time, Fast Company, and Wired. She gave a TED Talk titled "Owning the Room" that amassed 20 million views in a week. She was named Person of the Year by TechCrunch and the most powerful woman in business by Forbes. In a sit-down interview with Gayle King, Amara was asked what she would say to Preston if given the chance. Her reply was simple: "I'd say thank you, because his disrespect reminded me of something I almost forgot. I don't need their table. I can build my own." Whispers of a fall back at the Devereaux Group, the damage became too deep to ignore. 3 board members resigned. A class action lawsuit was filed by former employees alleging decades of discriminatory hiring practices. Preston was quietly removed from all executive decision-making roles, a forced sabbatical that insiders knew was a soft exile. Stock analysts downgraded the company's ratings, citing significant reputational risk. The once invincible Devereaux name was now whispered with caution, not reverence. Legacy versus impact. 2 months after the scandal, a journalist published a long-form piece titled "The Fall of a Dynasty, the Rise of a Visionary." It chronicled how a single night and a single choice had changed everything. The article closed with a quote from one of Amara's closest advisors. They had the legacy. She had the impact. And when the moment came, she chose principle over profit. That's real power. The power shift, in the end, Amara didn't need revenge. She didn't need to clap back or burn bridges. She did something much more powerful. She made herself undeniable. While the Devereaux fought to salvage their name, Amara built a new kind of empire, one rooted in integrity, innovation, and inclusion. And everywhere she went, people remembered her not just as the woman who walked away from a billion-dollar deal, but as the woman who taught the world that dignity has no price tag. 6 months had passed since Amara Jackson walked away from the Devereaux deal, 6 months since the world watched a black woman redefine power not through revenge, but through restraint. In those months, the business world had undergone a quiet shift. Amara hadn't just dodged a bullet, she had rewritten the blueprint. She showed every underestimated founder, every overlooked executive, every disrespected genius that success wasn't about proximity to old money. It was about the courage to walk alone until the world caught up. The vision expands. By now, Neuronetics was no longer just a tech company, it was a global movement. Amara had launched a series of initiatives under the banner of Project Mindshift, Neuronetics Global Fellows, a year-long accelerator program for underrepresented founders working on ethical AI. The Code Initiative, bringing advanced computer science and neuroscience curricula to public schools in underserved areas. A landmark partnership with the United Nations to use Neuronetics AI to model climate displacement and crisis response in real time. Investors who had once treated Amara with suspicion were now desperate to be associated with her brand. But she remained selective. Money's easy, she told her executive team in a quarterly meeting. Alignment is rare. Her empire was growing, but on her terms. The invitation one evening, Amara received a thick envelope in gold trim. It wasn't an email. It was old-fashioned, couriered to her office. The Devereaux family was hosting a private benefit gala in New York for global innovation and philanthropy. Proceeds would go to AI education. Amara read the invitation twice. It was embossed with her name and labeled as special honored guest. The irony nearly made her laugh. Preston Devereaux's signature was nowhere on the letter, nor was Henry's. This time, it was Margot Devereaux who had extended the olive branch, likely realizing that Amara's presence was no longer a favor. It was a lifeline. Her team debated whether she should attend. Half were adamantly against it. The other half saw an opportunity. Amara listened to everyone's opinions. Then, after a long pause, she said, "I'm not going to attend their party. I'm going to host my own." The Power Summit. A month later, Amara announced the Mindshift Power Summit, a 2-day global conference in New York City. The guest list? Curated with surgical precision. Innovators, creators, philanthropists, educators, scientists, activists. It was a gathering of the future, the antithesis of every old money, back-patting gala the business world had grown used to. Tickets sold out in minutes. Corporate sponsors lined up. CNN broadcasted live from the venue. Beyoncé donated $1 million to the event and sent a pre-recorded message praising Amara as the new standard of power. Keynote speakers included Nobel laureates, AI ethicists, and formerly incarcerated coders who had been given a second chance through one of Neuronetics' programs. And in the center of it all, calm, poised, radiant, stood Amara Jackson. The moment the world remembered. On the second night of the summit, Amara walked on stage to a packed auditorium. No teleprompter. No notes. Just presence. The room went silent. She looked out the crowd and began, 6 months ago, I walked away from $1 billion deal. People ask me why. They said it's just a joke. It's just how the world works. But here's what I know. When you accept disrespect in exchange for a check, you don't just lose your self-worth. You teach the next generation to do the same. I didn't walk away because I was angry. I walked away because I was clear. Clear about what I'm building. Clear about who I am. Clear about what real power looks like. She paused, letting the applause rise and settle. Then she said the line that would echo far beyond the auditorium. Power isn't owning the room. Power is knowing you can walk out and still build something so big they have to follow you anyway. The room erupted. Legacy cemented by the time the summit ended, Amara had secured $250 million in funding for her Global Fellows program, fully funded by a coalition of ethical tech investors, a strategic partnership with MIT to create the Jackson Center for Ethical AI, a personal invitation from the U.S. President to serve on the National AI and Ethics Council, and perhaps most impressively, the admiration of a generation who now viewed her not just as a CEO, but as a movement leader. Her team couldn't keep up with the emails. Hollywood wanted a biopic. Top-tier universities wanted honorary degrees. Global leaders wanted her at their summits. And through it all, Amara stayed grounded. She turned down most of the attention. She preferred classrooms over cameras, labs over red carpets. But she said yes to one thing. The last word 3 weeks after the Power Summit, a journalist sat down with Amara for a cover story in Time titled The Woman Who Walked Away and Took the Future with Her. In the interview, the journalist asked, "Do you ever regret not taking that billion-dollar deal?" Amara smiled, that now iconic knowing smile. Then she replied, "Walking away wasn't a loss. Staying would have been." Epilogue. A different kind of empire years later, when people told the story of Amara Jackson, they didn't just talk about her exit from the Devereaux deal. They talked about how she changed the rules, how she made the business world reconsider what power really looks like. Not inherited, not bought, not performed, but earned, lived, and walked in without apology. Amara didn't just walk away from $1 billion deal. She walked into history. The end.